Hello and welcome to today's episode. I am Justine Kaur and joining with us the Conservative leadership candidate Pierre Poilievre. Hello Mr. Poilievre, pleasure to have you in our studio. Thank you for your time.
It's great to be with you, Jasleen. Thank you for the invite.
Pleasure. Mr. Poilievre, since 2015, this is the third leadership race for the Conservative Party of Canada. There are six candidates who are vying for the leadership. So what sets you apart from other candidates?
My purpose in running for Prime Minister is to put Canadians back in charge of their lives by making Canada the freest nation on earth. People feel like they've lost control of their lives, whether you're the person who's lost a job because of a personal medical decision that the government has punished you for through vaccine mandates, whether you are a small business person destroyed by lockdowns, or whether you're a single mother who's skipping meals so your kids don't have to because food price inflation has made groceries too expensive, or whether you're the 32-year-old living in your parents' basement because home prices have doubled under Justin Trudeau. People feel like they've lost control of their lives, and I'm running for Prime Minister to put them back in control of their lives by making Canada the freest nation on earth. That's my purpose, and that's why I'm here.
So initially, Mr. Poilievre, it looked like it is a two-way race between you and John Sherry. But now Patrick Brown is drawing attention as well. He recently got the support by Michelle Repeal. So who do you see as your most toughest competitor?
Well, I'm prepared to challenge all of those candidates at the end of the day. Right now, house prices are up 100% in 7 years. I'm the only candidate with a real plan to make housing affordable. And that includes, first of all, stop the federal government from printing all of this cash that is flooding our real estate market and inflating prices. And second of all, I'm going to tie federal infrastructure funds for cities to the number of houses that actually get built. In other words, build more homes, print less money, so that our young people can once again afford a place to live. I also disagree with both Mr. Brown and Charest. They support a carbon tax that raises the price of gas, heat, and food. I will axe the carbon tax to make life more affordable for Canadian consumers and bring in real environmental plans of technology rather than taxation. In other words, I'm going to tackle inflation, or just inflation, as I call it, with a common sense policy that makes your paycheck go further.
Absolutely. We'll talk more about inflation, but when you say that you want to make Canada the freest nation on earth, what exactly do you mean by that? I know you have mentioned some of the points, but you also wrote an essay back in 1999 that building Canada through freedom. So what exactly is your policy?
Yes, you're right. That was back in 1999. I would have been about 19 or 20 years old, and I was saying the same things back then than I am today. What I mean is, more freedom through less government. The bigger government becomes, the less freedom people have. For example, Trudeau is forcing people to take vaccines even if they've chosen not to. I don't believe you can force someone to put something in their body against their will. So I would get rid of all the vaccine mandates. He's taken away our economic freedom. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. Inflationary deficits and taxes are making life more expensive. The more he spends, the more things cost. So I would eliminate the inflationary deficits and taxes so that people have the freedom to retain the value of their dollar, which they earn through hard work. He's attacking freedom of expression by censoring the internet through C11, one bill, and through the creation of what he calls a digital safety commissioner. These policies, by the way, will hurt ethnocultural media because they favor the press gallery in Ottawa and the corporate media at the expense of independent voices like yours. I would get rid of all of that censorship and have a completely free and open internet so that Canadian readers can decide what kind of media they want to have. So in other words, I would get rid of all of the governmental controls that Trudeau is trying to impose on people to allow Canadians to have the freedom to own a home, to work hard, to keep their money, to think what they want, to pray to God in their own way without government interference. That's what it means to be the freest nation on earth.
So what will be your priorities, and what are some of the other issues you will be focusing on apart from the carbon tax?
Well, more broadly, inflation. It's at a 30-year high. The house prices have doubled in 7 years. They're up 50% in 2 years alone. Why is all this happening? Well, as I said earlier, the cost of government is driving up the cost of living. $500 billion of inflationary deficits mean more dollars bidding up the same number of goods. If you have an economy with 10 loaves of bread and $10, well, it's $1 for each loaf of bread. If you double the number of dollars to 20 with the same 10 loaves of bread, then you double the cost of a loaf to 2. So what we need to do is, instead of creating more cash, we need to create more of what cash buys, grow more food, build more homes, and generate more Canadian energy. So I would remove the regulatory red tape, the gatekeepers who block housing construction, by incentivizing municipalities to remove the red tape, let builders build more homes. I would get rid of the carbon tax and other regulations on our farmers so they can produce more affordable food. And I would approve pipelines so that we can get Canadian energy to Canadian consumers. It's crazy that we're importing 130,000 barrels of oil a day from dirty, foreign, polluting dictatorships across the ocean when we have the third biggest supply here in Canada. I would unleash production of Canadian energy here to replace those imports and ban dictator oil from Canada altogether within 5 years. And finally, we have the gatekeepers who are blocking our immigrants from working in the professions for which they were trained. We have doctors, engineers, plumbers who come here with skills, but they are not allowed to work because they're denied a license. So I'm going to make it a condition of federal immigration settlement money that provinces speed up the recognition of foreign credentials to 60 days. So if a qualified immigrant applies, they should get approved within 60 days. If they are not quite qualified, I'm going to back up 30,000 loans that they can use to leave their job, study, get qualified, get licensed, so that they can work as doctors, engineers, plumbers, or other high-skilled jobs that we need in our economy.
But is there a timeline when these policies will be implemented?
Well, I'll go through them one at a time. The recognition of foreign credentials, I would like to have within the first couple of years in office, a deal across Canada with all our provinces to have a 60-day guarantee for immigrants who apply to work in their field to get a yes or a no, and to bring in within the same period roughly a merit-based approval process so that people are judged based on their abilities, not based on where they did their studying. On the energy side, one of my first acts will be to repeal the anti-energy laws Trudeau has brought in. That will allow us to, for example, increase production of oil in Newfoundland by 400,000 barrels a day and replace overseas oil within 5 years. So you asked for a timeline. 5 years is how long that will take. The carbon tax, I'll work to eliminate that immediately. And I'll also end the Bank of Canada's money printing to fund government spending immediately as well, so that we can rein in this inflation and restore purchasing power in Canada.
You also talked about skilled workers. So we know immigration plays an important role in Canadian economy.
Yes.
So what do you think about current immigration system, and how do you plan to make it better?
Well, I think it's too bureaucratic right now. I envision an express entry program that allows skilled workers who have a job offer to get here with a work permit within 2 weeks and get permanent residency within 6 months. If an employer can't find a Canadian to do the job, they should be able to quickly recruit someone from another country to come here, do the job with a work permit, and then help that person quickly transition to permanency in Canada. When somebody demonstrates that they are doing a job that Canadians are not able to fill, then we obviously need them here. We need to speed up the recognition of their credentials so that they can actually work in their professions. And that is the approach I would take. On refugees, I want to support more private sponsorship of refugees. Private sponsorship is more effective than government sponsorship. When you have a church, mosque, synagogue, gurdwara, or a nonprofit supporting a newcomer, giving them language lessons, finding them apartment, building their resume, they're far more likely to be successful than if it's just the government bureaucracy putting them here without support. So I want to expand the private sponsorship of refugees. And then for family reunification, my big priority is to reunite spouses. Many times spouses are kept apart by the bureaucracy. If you reunite the spouse, oftentimes they're younger, which means they'll be contributing to the labor market for many decades, which is a big boost to our economy. and it makes it possible for the spouse who is already here to do more in the economy. So that's my approach. I think immigration, the biggest problem immigrants face right now is the gatekeepers, not to get into the country, but when they get here, the gatekeepers who block housing and construction, which shuts newcomers out of neighborhoods, the gatekeepers who block them from getting work licenses in their fields. I want to remove those gatekeepers to make this the freest country in the world.
All right, Mr. Poilievre, we'll continue this chat, but right after a short break. Welcome back. After the break, we have in conversation with us the Conservative leadership candidate Pierre Poilievre. Mr. Poilievre, Liberals have been in the minority since last 2 elections. So how do you plan to unite the country and form a majority government?
Right. Well, listen, I think we need to unite our country around freedom. Freedom is our nationality in Canada. And the Liberals have been taking away our freedom with heavy hand, with big, bossy government that takes your money and tells you what to do. And what has been the consequence of that? We have a whole generation of young people who say they cannot afford a home. Many of them think they will never be able to afford a home. The system right now only works for the very rich who are already in big mansions because their home prices are going through the roof. Meanwhile, working class youth and immigrants are prevented from having a home. So my plan is to stop printing money, start building homes. I announced that in big cities, mayors who want to, who are blocking housing construction might face a clawback of their infrastructure dollars. And they will need to increase housing construction by 15% a year to maintain their federal infrastructure money from my government. That will incentivize them to get out of the way and let builders build affordable homes for our young people. And we will win a government as Conservatives by championing the dream of home ownership for young people in places like Brampton, Mississauga, Scarborough, Surrey, Vancouver, who've been shut out of the housing market. Even though Canada's the second biggest country on earth, we have more land in Canada than almost any other nation in the world, and yet we can't find room to house everyone. A Poilievre government will remove the gatekeepers who are blocking home construction to get our youth housed. Recently,
we know that Liberal and NDP signed confidence and supply agreements. How do you see that agreement?
I think it's a disaster for working class youth because they're now going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars in inflationary deficits. All this spending is driving up the cost of living. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. Inflationary deficits mean more dollars chasing fewer goods. Inflationary taxes make it more expensive for businesses to produce those goods. The more Liberals and NDP spend, the more things cost. I call it just inflation. Just inflation is what we're seeing at the gas pumps, in the grocery stores, and in the housing market. We need to rein in the cost of government. And I would get rid of Trudeau's $100 billion spending plan. I would get rid of the multi-billion-dollar infrastructure bank that isn't building any infrastructure. It's just protecting the profits of companies. I would defund the CBC to save $1 billion and to put media outlets like yours on a level playing field. By saving all of this money, we can bring in a more affordable government and a more affordable cost of living.
But don't you think two parties working together will work in favor of Canada?
Well, right now they're working against the interests of Canada. People feel like they've lost control of their lives. You know, go to the grocery store. Look at the cost of everything. It's going up. Look at gas. It's now $2 a liter. I meet people who can't drive to see their dying parents because they can't fill up their truck with gas. This is and we're seeing people fall deep into poverty and depression because inflation is rising 3 times faster than wages. Which means people are experiencing a real pay cut. Now this is fine for the super rich because their assets are growing in price. They're getting richer. But the working class people are suffering as a result of this socialist coalition. We need to put an end to it and bring in an affordable government to restore an affordable quality of life.
But what's your take on NDP's policies, universal pharmacare and dental care?
Well, first of all, universal pharmacare, what they really want to do is take away your private coverage. If you bring in a government takeover of pharmacare, many of the hardworking unionized employees who already have a private plan will lose it, and they'll end up with an inferior plan provided by the government at the cost of $20 billion to taxpayers. Again, that's just going to mean more inflation and more debt. It's trickle-down government. They say, well, if you give your money to the federal government, it will give it to the provincial government, which gives it to the municipal government. And by the time anything trickles down to the people who earned it in the first place, there's nothing left. I would rather lower the tax burden, leave more money in the pockets of the people who earned it, and increase the purchasing power of our dollar.
Mr. Poilievre, you're currently attracting huge crowds in the areas that traditionally do not vote for Conservatives, for example, Toronto, but with many months still to go until vote, you think keeping the momentum going will be a challenge for you?
Not necessarily. I think the people want to take back control of their lives. Big bossy government that takes their money and tells them what to do has driven people into despair. I'm giving them hope. People come up to me at these events and they say they finally have hope again that Canada can be the free country that they came here for. And that's why they're coming out. They want to take back control of their lives. They're tired of being bullied by their prime minister. They're tired of having their dollars chewed up by inflation. They see a real plan in my agenda that will give them back control of their lives, give them back the purchasing power of their dollar, and make Canada the freest nation on earth.
And as I mentioned that you're attracting crowds in GTA. So you are in GTA right now, and GTA has some of the main issues, for example, gun and gang violence, overdose crisis. What's your plan on that?
Well, let's start with guns. According to the Toronto Police Force, 86% of the guns used in crime in Toronto are smuggled in from the United States. Yet instead of targeting gun smugglers, Justin Trudeau is targeting the lawful, licensed, trained, and tested firearms owners. You know, he calls it a ban, but there's not a single solitary criminal that's going to voluntarily hand in their firearm to the government as part of that policy. Instead, he's wasting $1 billion going after the honest people. What he should do is take that $1 billion and put it into border security so that we can check the shipping containers that come into our country and that bring 86% of the guns. You know what else he's doing? He's lowering the penalties for serious crime with guns. So when someone gets convicted of extortion or harming someone with a firearm, they're going to get a lighter sentence under Trudeau's liberal policies. I would do the opposite. Instead of targeting lawful people, I'll put the $1 billion into bolstering our border to stop the smuggling, and then I'll put the criminals behind bars so that they can't come back out onto our streets and shoot up our neighborhoods.
The main thing is that who can beat the Liberals in the next elections. And of course, the members of the Conservative parties would want to send a leader in that seat who can talk about issues that matter most to the Canadians. And now the election is unlikely for next few years. So what strategy will you use to win the next election if elected, and what will be the next step if you are not elected?
If I'm elected leader, then I intend to be one with the people, to go into the working class neighborhoods of this country and restore hope that Canada can again be the freest nation on earth by using tying federal infrastructure money to the number of houses that get built. We'll increase the supply of affordable homes for our young people by using federal immigration funds to pressure provinces to recognize foreign credentials. We'll allow young professionals from India, from China, and from other places work as doctors, engineers, plumbers with big, powerful, inflation-proof paychecks. By putting an end to the inflationary spending that's driving up the cost of living, we'll increase the purchasing power of people's dollars so that they can afford a good quality of life. And by getting the gatekeepers out of the way to produce more energy in Canada, we can ban dictator oil from our country and protect our environment. These are the messages that I will be sharing when I'm leader of the party and that I will be implementing when I'm Prime Minister of Canada.
All right, Mr. Poilievre, last question to you. You started your political career in 2004 and you are one of the longest member parliament in Conservative Party. So is this something you always wanted?
Well, you know, no, it wasn't. Originally, I thought I would be a sports star, but then I injured my shoulder when I was a teenager, and I couldn't do sports, so my mother took me to a conservative meeting. And then I said, okay, well, if I'm not going to be in sports, maybe politics is a good second choice. And so that's how I ended up being in politics. But I've always believed in the same thing, a small government with big citizens. And that's what guides me today and what will guide me when I'm Prime Minister.
Before I let you go, any message you have for the viewers?
Yes, I want you to take back control of your life. For too long, big, bossy government has been taking your money and telling you what to do. That has left your young people without homes. It has left professionals from abroad without jobs. It has stifled opportunity and made it impossible for many to feed their families with nutritious food. And my purpose is to give you back control of your life by making Canada the freest country in the world. The great thing about freedom is that there's enough for everyone. Control is the opposite. If one person gets more control, someone else gets less. But with freedom, if your neighbor gets more freedom, then you get more freedom. If your Muslim friend has more religious freedom, then you as a Sikh or a Christian will also have more freedom. It never runs out. And that's why it is a unifying principle that brings all Canadians together. So let's unite for freedom as you take back control of your life in the freest nation on earth. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Poilievre, thank you so much for joining PTC Punjabi. We really appreciate your time. It was a pleasure talking to you and we wish you good luck.
Great to be with you.
Pleasure.